Hello and welcome once again to our virtual classroom, ladies and gentlemen. What I want to do today is go over the review for our topic 2 test. And I'm just going to go through each question at a time. I do, however, want to ask you to not just put in the answer. That will do you nothing. I'm going to pause before each question, or really you can just pause the video, try to do it on your own, and then maybe check the answer or check your work with mine. But again, you should be able to do each of these questions on your own. If you're not doing it on your own, or you would, let's say you got this question on the test tomorrow, if you feel like you couldn't have done that on your own, then really look at your notes, look at previous assignments, look at the way that I did it, um, and maybe try to do it with different numbers. But anyways, let's go ahead and begin with question number 1. It says, what is 15% of 205? What is 15% of 205? Ladies and gentlemen, every single one of these problems has to do or can be resolved with ratios. Ratios with proportions, basically having fractions or ratios that are equivalent to each other. And in this case, this being a percent problem, because we have a percent right there, we know that we're going to have two fractions. One of them is going to represent the percentages, and the other one's going to represent the part over the whole. Really, in the classroom, again, we have a percent, which is always over 100. And the part will always be equal, will always be over the whole. Notice how the part refers to the percentage and the whole refers to 100%. 100% will always be the whole, the percentage will always be the part. And so in essence, what we have to do is fill in the different parts of this ratio. Of this proportion. For example, here it says, what is 15% of 25? First thing that I notice is that we have 15%. By now, you should know that a percentage, ladies and gentlemen, can always be expressed as that number over 100. So 15% is literally the same thing as 15 over 100. So I can write that down as one of my ratios, 15 over 100. And there you go. I basically filled out this part. What goes over 100? 15. Why? Because it's 15%. Now notice that here it says of 205. Of 205. If you remember from our class, from our lesson, the part usually is associated with the word is, and the word and the whole is associated with the word of. So we're taking 15% of 205, meaning that 205 is our whole. So in other words, we know that 205 is our 100%. 15% of that, we don't know what that is. So that's what we're looking for. And what's cool about setting it up this way, guys, is that while there's multiple ways of doing this problem, there are 2 steps that we talked about that always work. And those 2 steps are to cross multiply and divide. Cross multiply and divide. So what am I going to cross multiply? Well, you always want to cross multiply the numbers that you can actually multiply, right? For example, I cannot multiply 100 and x. So obviously I'm going to do 205 and 15. So let's go ahead and do that. 205 times 15. 15 times 5, 5 times 5 is 25. 5 times 0 is 0, plus 2 is 2. 5 times 2 is 10. All right, we're done with this one. We're done with this column. Let's continue with 5. 1 times 0 is 0. 1 times 2 is 2. And then we add them all together to give me 5, 7, 0, and 3. So we have 3,075. So I cross multiplied, and then the second step is to divide, and you always divide by the only other number. So I'm going to divide 3,075 by 100. By now, you should know that when you're dividing by 100, you're just moving the decimal over 2 times from wherever it is. So I move it from the very end. So that would give me 30 and 75 hundredths. So that means that 15% of 205 would be 30 and 75 hundredths. And that's exactly what my answer would be, 30 and 75 hundredths. Again, once you set it up, ladies and gentlemen, once you set it up as a proportion, as 2 ratios, 2 fractions equivalent to each other, all you have to do is cross multiply and divide. Now, are there other ways of solving problems like that? Yes, as you're going to see in the next problem. But again, I encourage you to rewind it and see if you understood how I did that. So let's go ahead and do the next problem. And I am going to be moving a little bit faster since you're going to see a pattern in every single one of these problems. All right, so now it says for question number 2, 50 is 25% of what number? Okay, so let me go ahead and set up both ratios. Now, I encourage you to pause it right now and see if you can set up those two ratios. Try to do it on your own and then compare it to what I am about to do right now. All right, let's go ahead and do it together. 25%, that's the first thing I noticed. Anytime you have a percent, ladies and gentlemen, you just put that number over 100. 25% is the same thing as 25 over 100. It doesn't matter which fraction you choose for the percentage. It really does not matter, as long as you have 25 over 100. Now, notice that it says 50 is. Remember, guys, that it's always going to be is over of. You may not always have those words, but when you do, make sure that you take advantage of that. 50 is 25%, meaning that 50 is only a part of something. So that's obviously going to be the part of what number? I don't know. Notice 50 is 25%, so that's why it's the part. What number are we talking about? What number makes up 100%? I do not know. 25 is the percent, so that goes over 100. Let's go ahead. Now, you could cross multiply and divide. 50 times 100 divided by 25, you could do that. However, ladies and gentlemen, as easy as that would be, 50 times 100 and then divide by 25, I'm not going to do that because this is one of those problems that you can easily solve just by scaling it upward. 25 times what will give me 250? Well, isn't 25 times 2 equal to 50? And if I'm multiplying the numerator by 2, I need to multiply the denominator by 2 to get to the other denominator. What's 100 times 2? That would be 200. Meaning that 50 is 25% of 200, and that would be my answer. Hopefully that made sense, ladies and gentlemen. All right, moving on to the next one. Like I said, if you're able to set it up as a proportion, it should be pretty simple. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're given a graph here. And notice that on the x-axis, we have flushes, and on the y-axis, I have gallons of water. Notice that if I were to take a line, and if I were to start at the origin and follow each of the dots, it makes a perfectly straight line, which those are the two things that you're looking in a proportional relationship. If you're given a graph and it makes a perfectly straight line and that line crosses the origin, remember the origin is the point right here, 0, 0, or x is 0 and y is 0, you know that it's a proportional relationship. What does that mean? That means that I could take any one of these points. And if I make it into a ratio, into a fraction, then all those fractions are going to be equivalent. A fraction of what? Well, just pick one of these. Let's say we put flushes on top. It really doesn't matter. And over here we have gallons of water. So, for example, right here I have flushes. Each of these is going by 1, so it's going to be 1 flush. So 1 flush. So let's go back to the dot. Will be 4 gallons of water. Okay, let's look at the next one. 2 flushes gives me 8 gallons of water. So 2, 8. Let's do one more. 3 flushes, as I can see in the graph, will give me 12. That's a 12 right there. 12 gallons of water. What do you notice about each of these ratios? 1/4, 2/8, 3/12. If you pay close attention, you notice that all of these simplify to 1/4, meaning all of these are proportional. You can take any two of these and cross multiply them. For example, 4 times 2 is 8, 8 times 1 is 8. You can see that they are all equivalent. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have a proportional relationship. And so really all you're doing down here in this table is you are saying, okay, well, how many gallons of water will you use for 1 flush, for 2 flushes, for 3 flushes, for 4 flushes? And I realize that it doesn't line up perfectly with the numbers, but really, again, how many gallons of water for 1 flush, for 2 flushes, for 3 flushes, for 4 flushes? We can get that information from the table. Really, all you are seeing, ladies and gentlemen, is that when you're comparing the flushes to the gallons of water, for every flush, you are spending 4 gallons of water. Now, that's an important relationship to keep in mind because look at what question 4 says. In the above problem, using the problem above, How many gallons, we don't know the number of gallons of water, will 8 flushes produce? In other words, we need to come up with a ratio where there's 8 flushes. How many gallons will be used? Now, this is one of those problems that you can easily factor upward. For example, 1 times what will give me 8, which is obviously 1 times 8. So you multiply the denominator by the same number. 4 times 8 will give me what number? You could solve this problem doing that. But ladies and gentlemen, since we've done these problems, I've taught you another method you can also use. For any ratio, if you're trying to make an equivalent ratio, you can always cross multiply and divide. Notice that if I cross multiply 8 times 4, 32 divided by 1, that gives us the answer. My point being that there's multiple methods that you can use. Any method that you can use to make an equivalent ratio will apply to any of these problems. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I don't want to necessarily go through every single problem in this specific video. I don't want this video to be too long, but if you can do the rest of it on your own, excellent. But you're going to be using the same logic for every single one of these problems. So with that in mind, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you found this helpful, and hopefully you are prepared for the test. Have a good one.